ever feel like you're just drowning in information?
Totally.
But at the same time, you're like so thirsty
Yeah.
for like actual insights.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone's throwing facts and figures at you, but you are left wondering, are we even asking the right questions here?
Yeah.
And that's exactly why we're taking this deep dive
Okay.
into the HBR Guide to Critical Thinking.
Yeah.
It's like a mental boot camp
Okay.
for anybody who wants to cut through all that noise,
Uh,
make sharper decisions,
make better decisions. Absolutely.
be more informed, right?
Yes.
And I've got an expert along for the ride today
Happy to be here.
who helps top companies use critical thinking to like make these smarter moves in the business world.
It's really fun.
And what's really resonated with me so far is what you said about like this isn't about like a critical thinking gene. Like you're either born with it or you're not.
Right. You don't have to be like born a genius. It's a learned
Some-
skill.
Exactly. What's fascinating is that the guide starts with mindset and how your mental approach to a problem often matters more than like your raw intelligence.
It's so true. Yeah. You can be like a really smart person,
Yeah.
but if you don't have that right mindset going into it, you might not see the full picture.
It's like having like all the best ingredients, but
Yeah.
you don't know how to use an oven. So you're not going to, your cake's going to be a mess.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't know how to use your tools, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of messing up the recipe, one of the first things that the guide tackles is this urgency trap.
Oh.
And we've all been there, right? It's that feeling that you need to make a decision right now,
Right.
even if you don't have all the facts.
Yes. And we've all been there, like you said. The guide actually gives this example of this manager named Jenna, who's constantly in this reactive mode, always putting out fires, you know. She's scheduling all these back-to-back meetings.
Oh, yeah.
But it's actually backfiring because instead of making well-considered decisions, she's just reacting to the loudest thing, you know, or whatever's in her face at that moment.
It's like trying to write this podcast episode
Yeah.
while simultaneously planning like my grocery list and answering emails
Multitasking.
and like mentally color coding my bookshelf at the same time.
Right. Nothing's going to get done well.
Nothing's getting done well.
Yeah.
So how do we escape this urgency trap? Like what's the secret sauce?
Well, the guide calls it reflective urgency,
Okay.
which sounds kind of like a contradiction,
It does.
but it's kind of brilliant.
Okay.
So it's all about building in these many pauses,
Okay.
these moments of like conscious reflection, even when you're feeling that pressure to act immediately.
So you're not getting swept away in the current. You're actually taking a step back.
Exactly. You're stepping out of the flow for a second and you're assessing and prioritizing.
Okay, that feels way more doable than just trying to like erase all feelings of urgency.
Right, because you can't get rid of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's this other big idea I love that the guide emphasizes. Thinking like a scientist.
Yes.
And before you picture me in a lab coat,
I mean, no beakers.
we're not talking about Bunsen burners or anything like that.
Yeah, it's really about applying that same questioning, evidence-based mindset to your work and your life.
Okay.
And they give a great example with Sony.
Yeah.
Their TV business, they were in a slump for years, like bleeding money.
Oh, no.
And so their initial assumption was that they just needed to sell more TVs.
Right. That makes sense. More TVs, more money.
Right, basic math, right.
Yeah.
But here's where challenging your assumptions comes in.
Okay.
Their new CEO, Kazuo Hirai, he was a little skeptical. So he was like, let me just dig into the data here.
Okay.
And he realized that they were actually making each TV cheaper and cheaper just to hit those sales targets, but it was just digging them in a deeper hole, you know?
Okay.
So he did the unexpected. He focused on fewer but higher quality TVs,
Interesting.
and it totally turned the business around.
Oh, wow. Okay, that is a business move.
Right.
Worthy of a standing ovation.
It's amazing what a little critical thinking can do.
Right. But it highlights something so important from the guide. Sometimes the obvious solution is actually leading you down the wrong path.
That's right.
And if you don't stop to question it,
Yeah.
you'll never
Yeah.
find those game-changing solutions.
You'll never know. You got to think outside the box.
Exactly. So we're thinking like scientists. We're questioning all those assumptions. But the guide doesn't stop there. It also dives into this whole idea of observation. And I have to admit, when I first saw that, I was like, really? Observation.
Yeah.
Isn't that a bit obvious?
It seems like it, right?
Yeah.
But they make this great distinction between just seeing and truly observing.
Okay.
It's like being a detective, you know, looking for clues. They actually use Sherlock Holmes as an example, which I love.
Okay, now that's a reference I was not expecting in a business guide.
It's so good, right?
Yeah.
So they talk about how he was able to pick up on the tiniest details, things that most people would just miss. And they even suggest that, if you want to improve your own observation skills, try this. Describe a situation out loud to someone, as if you're Holmes laying out a case for Watson.
Interesting.
Apparently, we notice things we wouldn't have just by, putting them into words.
Wow.
Yeah.
I might have to try that with my partner tonight. But he's going to think I've, totally lost it.
He might.
But it makes sense because when you have to, articulate something, you're forced to slow down
You have to, yeah.
and really pay attention.
Totally. You can't just, gloss over it,
No.
And that's really crucial for critical thinking because those, seemingly insignificant details, they can often hold the key to, a major breakthrough.
Right.
But it's not just about those tiny clues. The guide also talks about, looking at everyday things with fresh eyes. You know how Velcro was invented?
Oh, yeah. Tell me.
It was inspired by those little burrs, that stick to your clothes.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's kind of blowing my mind. I'm looking at this coffee stain on my shirt in a whole new light now.
Right.
Yeah. But how does that, tie back to decision making?
Well, it's about finding inspiration in those unexpected places. Sometimes that solution to this, complex problem you're facing, it's right there in front of you. You just need to shift your perspective a bit to see it.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's all about that shift.
And that actually leads us to another powerful tool that the guide talks about, which is reframing.
Okay, reframing. I remember reading about that. It's like that optical illusion. You see either a vase or two faces.
Yeah.
Same image, different interpretation.
Yes, exactly. That's a great way to put it. The guide actually uses the example of a slow elevator.
Okay.
So, imagine, you're in an office building and the elevator's really slow.
Ugh, the worst.
The worst, right. But it's not about actually fixing the elevator, which would be expensive and time-consuming, but rather shifting how people experience that weight.
Interesting. Okay.
So they suggest things like adding mirrors,
Oh, smart.
playing music, just little distractions, essentially, that change your perception of time without actually solving that core issue.
And I bet that sparks all sorts of creative solutions that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise.
Exactly. Because you're breaking free from that, fix-it mindset,
Right.
and you're exploring different angles, different ways of approaching the problem. It's really cool.
So we've honed our observation skills. We're reframing like pros. What is the next step in our critical thinking journey?
Well, the guide then dives into the art of asking the right questions.
Okay, I have to admit, when I first got to that section, I was like, okay, everyone knows how to ask questions.
Right, we all ask questions.
Right.
But are we asking the right ones? That's the key. And the guide highlights how even Clayton Christensen, the Harvard business,
Oh, yeah, the guru.
Guru, exactly. He attributed much of his success to asking great questions. It's not just about gathering information, it's about challenging your assumptions, digging deeper and uncovering hidden truths.
So not just what time is it,
Yeah.
but how is our perception of time influencing this decision?
Yes, exactly. You got it. And they actually break it down into 4 types of questions.
Okay.
Clarifying, adjoining, funneling, and elevating. And each type has a different purpose. They're like tools in a toolkit,
Okay. I'm intrigued. Lay it on me. Let's unpack these. Let's start with clarifying questions.
All right, so clarifying questions, it's all about making sure that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah.
It's really surprising how often we assume we understand something. But then we start asking clarifying questions and you realize, oh, wait, there are all these different interpretations.
Yeah, different assumptions at play. And that lack of clarity can really derail even the best laid plans.
100%.
Okay, so clarifying questions, those are the foundation. What about adjoining questions?
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. Adjoining questions are all about making connections. So it's about looking for parallels, similar situations in other industries or even in seemingly unrelated fields.
So it's about connecting the dots that other people might miss.
Yes, exactly. It's about expanding your field of vision, drawing inspiration from all these different sources, which I love. And then we have funneling questions, which are all about going deep.
Okay, so like a detective narrowing down the suspects.
Precisely. It's about asking why and how, relentlessly. You're peeling back those layers to get to the root of the issue. You don't just want the surface level answer, you want the real story.
Right, and I can see how it would be so valuable, especially when you're dealing with a complex problem that has all these different layers. Okay.
Yep.
So we've clarified, we've adjoined, we've funneled. What's left?
elevating questions.
Okay.
And those are all about the big picture. It's about zooming out from the day-to-day details and considering the wider implications of your decisions.
So, like, thinking about those long-term consequences.
Yes?
The potential ripple effects.
100%. It's about challenging your initial assumptions. Asking, like, what if?
Okay.
What if we approach this from a completely different angle? What if the real problem is not what we think it is?
This making me realize how much I've been, like, limiting myself by not asking the right questions. It's like I've been using a butter knife when I could have been using a whole set of power tools.
That's a great way to put it. And here's the thing. The guide actually emphasizes that sometimes the best thing you can do is just sit with a problem for a while.
Right.
Don't rush to find the answer. Let it marinate in your mind a little bit.
Really, that goes against every instinct in my body. I'm a get-it-done person. It's like when you're working on, like, a creative project and you hit a wall.
Totally.
Sometimes the best thing you can do is, like, step away for a bit, let your subconscious do its thing,
Let it marinate.
and then come back with fresh eyes.
100%, yeah.
It's like our brains need that downtime
I do.
to make those unexpected connections.
It's true.
But there's another aspect the guy touches on that I find so fascinating,
Okay.
and that's this idea of collaboration. Because as much as we, like, love those aha moments, no one is a critical thinking island.
No, we need other people.
We need other people.
I do.
So 2 heads are better than 1.
2 heads are better than 1.
Especially
when they don't think alike.
Yes.
Oh, right.
They don't look exactly alike.
That's right.
Because the guy talks about how our brains are wired to, like, seek out information that confirms what we already believe.
Yes.
It's called confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias, it's such a trap.
Oh, it's such a trap.
It really is.
But when you bring in people with, like, different backgrounds, different experiences, different ways of seeing the world, you're challenging your own biases.
You are.
You're opening yourself up to, like, a whole new realm of possibility.
Totally, because they're going to see things that you don't see.
Yes, exactly.
And you're going to be like, oh, I didn't even think about it that way.
It's like, you know, if everyone in the room thinks the same way, you're probably missing out on some key insights.
Totally.
And it reminds me of that study that the guide mentions, where groups actually made better decisions when they didn't discuss their predictions with each other beforehand.
Isn't that interesting?
It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Because you would think, like, oh, we should talk it out. We should, like, get on the same page.
Yeah, you think so.
But actually, like, that can sometimes hinder
It can.
our ability to see those different perspectives.
Yeah, it's like you get stuck in a rut, you know, before you even start.
Yes, exactly.
And then you can't get out of it.
It's like we get stuck in our own echo chamber.
Totally.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It is fascinating.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We've covered a lot.
But for those of us who are, like, ready to put critical thinking into practice today, tomorrow,
Yes.
like, what are some key takeaways? If you had to narrow it down, what should we really keep in mind?
Well, we've touched on so many good techniques, but if I had to choose 3,
Okay.
I would say the first is be less certain.
Less certain.
Yeah.
You mean, like, embrace the doubt?
In a way, yes.
Okay.
Because the guide really emphasizes that overconfidence can be a major pitfall.
Oh, how so?
Well, it can lead us to make, like, rash decisions.
Yep.
We can overlook really crucial information.
Right.
And it makes us cling to solutions even when they're not working.
Oh, I've been there.
Right. We've all been there.
We've all been there.
Yeah. So it's really about acknowledging that we don't have all the answers.
Right.
And that there's always more to learn.
Okay, so be less certain.
Be less certain.
Okay, I like that. What's number 2?
Think like a scientist.
Okay, we've talked about that.
We have.
But, like, how do we actually put that into practice? Like, what does that look like day to day?
So the guide, they break down the scientific method into this framework that's really easy to remember and apply.
Okay.
Observe, hypothesize, experiment, analyze.
Okay, so it's like a cycle.
It's a cycle, yeah.
Okay.
And it's about approaching, like, everyday challenges with that same curiosity, that same rigor, you know, that willingness to test your assumptions.
Yeah, not be afraid to, like, get your hands dirty.
Exactly, and to be wrong.
Right.
Because sometimes you're going to be wrong, and that's okay.
And sometimes that evidence, like you said, that experimentation will lead you in a totally different direction.
Totally, like the Sony example.
Exactly. Which brings us to takeaway number 3.
Okay.
And this one, I'll admit, surprised me at first.
Okay.
Embrace your gut.
Yes.
I know it seems so counterintuitive to, like, everything we've been talking about.
It does.
But the guide makes a really crucial point here.
Okay.
Intuition isn't the enemy of critical thinking.
No, not at all.
In fact, when used correctly, it can be a really powerful asset.
Absolutely.
So it's not about like ignoring your gut feelings,
Right.
but rather like seeing them as a starting point for deeper exploration.
100%, because they're usually based on something.
Exists.
You know, they might not always be right, but usually they're like giving you a little signal.
It's like a data point
Exactly.
among many.
Among many.
Okay, this has been so insightful.
I've had so much fun.
Me too. I feel like I've got a whole new mental toolkit
Yes.
for navigating this crazy complex world.
That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about.
And remember, critical thinking, it's a journey,
It's a journey, not a destination.
not a destination. Exactly.
We're always learning.
Always.
And sometimes the most important step in that journey is just asking ourselves, like, am I asking the right questions?
The right questions, that's it.
That's it. That's the key.
That's the key.
So as you go about your day today, pay attention to the questions you're asking,
Yes.
and don't be afraid to challenge those assumptions, because you never know what you might discover.
You never...
This has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.
Thank you for having me. I had so much fun.